let's roll. Kevin and Nick, could you please intro and get us started?
Yep, thanks, Jess. Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Golterman, Partner Solutions Architect here at Datadog. I've been with Datadog for just over 3 years now. First 2 years were on the tech support side. Most recently, I switched to the partner team just over a year ago. So my day-to-day role is kind of helping out our partners, technical enablement, um, you know, everything encompassing that technical Datadog world. Um, Today, I'm going to kind of hop in, start with a little bit of intro from the Datadog side into what App Builder is, and then I'll pass it to Nick. So, Nick, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Nick Viccellio. I'm the principal engineer over at NoBS. We are a Datadog partner who focuses 100% on Datadog. So everything from implementations, hands-on keyboard, advisory service, SRE practice implementation. If it's related to Datadog or the automation or infrastructure surrounding it, we can help out. I've had a long engineering career at this point. I've been everything from a back-end developer to a database administrator, data scientist, and everything in between. The past few years, I've been focusing on Datadog implementations and observability, and looking forward to giving you guys a demo of the app builder today. So without further ado, I'll let Kevin get into it. We've got a few slides for you just to introduce you to App Builder, but this is not a slide-heavy presentation. We will actually get to building some things in the App Builder where you can watch me make a bunch of mistakes live, and we're going to have a great time. So Kevin, take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. Awesome. So, like Nick said, just a few slides from my end, so I won't bore you too much, but just want to kind of give you the overall context of what App Builder is, what it can do, why we use it, and give a little bit of insight into the Datadog product here. So, kick it off with how engineering teams are remediating their issues today. So today, engineering teams often rely on a mix of tools like command line. We have the internally developed tools, some custom scripts, and then you have the products like the cloud provider console. All these tools kind of create that siloing effect. Creating the disconnected workflows can have the possibility to introduce inconsistencies and overall just make it harder to standardize how teams respond to their incidents. So what are the major major issues with these approaches? Generally, these methods can work in the short term, right? But long term, they often become brittle, hard to maintain, lack centralized access to control or auditing. So few three main points here. First one being like the manual processes introduce human error and delay, right? Many remediation steps are still manual, not repeatable. This not only makes them slower, but also increases the risk of mistakes during those high pressure incidents. You also have the siloed tools leading to context switching and that overhead coordination. So remediation often requires jumping between the different interfaces and tools that don't necessarily talk to each other, whether it's scripts, cloud consoles, internal tools. All these are going to slow teams down and increase that chance of miscommunication while you're trying to solve that incident. Lastly, we have this lack of context or access. So even when teams detect a problem, they often don't have the necessary context or permissions in that one single place to fix it immediately. So this will lead to escalations, delays, incomplete remediation. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that one. So how are people using the app builder today? You look at this chart, right? On the left, we have SREs, platform engineers, system engineers. These are going to be the people responsible for building these apps. Typically, you would expect the SREs are building the apps to use themselves, right? App Builder kind of expands this. So the SREs build the apps, and then everyone from the team has the ability to use those apps. So these SREs, platform engineers, system engineers, all use the App Builder to centralize that observability and action so they can diagnose, remediate the incidents without having to jump between those tools or losing critical context. These teams are building custom apps with role-based controls. So this allows developers, other stakeholders to take safe, approved actions, right? You're dealing with sensitive information. You want to make sure that the wrong people don't see the the wrong data. So you can be able to use role access permissions to kind of lock down that data to the only people that need to really see it. So, whether it's FinOps, tracking cloud spend, security teams, analyzing threat patterns, the app builder helps uncover those deeper insights through tailored visualizations and interactive workflows. Okay, so like I said, short and sweet from my end. Important part here is going to be Nick kind of stepping us through what the app builder is, give you a real life example of how you can kind of build from scratch. So slides are over. I will pass it on to Nick to give us a live demo here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. So when we jump into the app builder, something that the Datadog App Builder comes with is a lot of pre-built actions and even pre-built applications for you to start with. As much as you certainly can start from scratch, we also have the ability to start with a blueprint, start with a layout in terms of like tables, forms, custom graphs, or just start with raw data. So a few high-level entry points, kind of built for you, suggested build, data, and then completely blank canvas. Go ahead and do it yourself. So one of the things Kevin mentioned was how a lot of people are using the app builder for remediation of issues or management of machines. And something that's still pretty common, even in the cloud these days, is having virtual machines that are static. They're not auto-scaling. They're machines that we need to take care of individually. And something that still happens really commonly in the industry is that if the machine is misbehaving, just give it a good old reboot. So we do have a template that we can start with in order to do so. And being the AWS person that I am, I'm going to go ahead and click the blueprint library, and let's just search for something like AWS, right? And we can see that right off the bat, we have a lot of options to go ahead and manage AWS directly from Datadog. And these are just a sampling. There's a lot more that you can do, and we'll see that in a second. But something that I'm interested in is managing the EC2 instances. So if we click on this, we can get a preview of what this looks like. And we can see right off the bat that we have the name of the server, the instance ID, what type it is, and the ability to start, stop, and reboot. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start with this one because I'm going to reboot some servers that are being problematic. So let's go ahead and click Use Blueprint. To start off, we're going to see that we have a bunch of demo data in here. If I click Start, Stop, or Reboot on any of these things, nothing is going to happen. Why is that? Well, Datadog wouldn't be silly enough to give you access to their AWS account to let you restart things for the app builder. So we want some real live data to work with. So the first thing that we'll want to do is manage our data source. So if we come up here and go to connection, we'll see that we already have an AWS account in place. And then conveniently, it's going to ask us if we want to apply this to all AWS queries. On the left side of the screen, we can see that not only is there list instances, but there's the ability to stop, start, and reboot. So we don't want to go ahead and do that all manually. So we'll just click yes, and that'll apply it to all. And now if we go through each of these, we'll see that our AWS sandbox connection is present. The next thing that we'll want to do is go ahead and change our region. As much as a lot of people use US East 1 because it's kind of the default, all of my instances are in US East 2. So we can go ahead and change that. Now you might be saying to yourself right off the bat, what if I want to change regions? What if I want to be able to select US East 1 or US East 2? Anything that you see next to a menu that has this little dollar curly bracket is the ability to use an expression, which we'll get a lot of usage out through the rest of this, but we could template this if we chose to. For now, we're just going to go ahead and click US East 2, and I'm going to go ahead and change this one as well, US East 2, because we'll need that. So let's go ahead and first of all, this hasn't changed anything. So if we click run, now we'll see that some more servers are present in here that are totally different. And we'll also see that we have an action execution. Anytime we run an action, we'll get the output while we're in the editor mode. Now, if you were actually running this application, it would look a bit more like this. And whatever you do here is not going to give you a debug output. But just like any editor worth its salt, we have the ability to inspect any requests that were made and the data that comes out of it. So what we can see right away is we have our instances response. And if you've ever used any of the AWS APIs, a lot of this stuff should look familiar to you. We have a lot of data that is present in here that gives us information about these EC2s. So let's go ahead and, Kevin, should I just reboot one of these things? See what happens?
You could, but I would probably suggest against it. Is there, we don't really want to blindly start rebooting stuff. Is there a way to kind of display some data so we can get a little bit of background information?
That's probably a good point. And speaking of displaying data, right now we have the name of the host, the instance ID, and the type, and then some other stuff here. But there's a lot of other data. What happened to this data? Where is it? If we click into any given component on the screen, we'll always get a bar that pops up on the right. So whether it's this menu or this table, we have the ability to see the configuration of each one of these components. And right away, what you'll see is that now we have all of our fields. They're just hidden. So if I choose to unhide these, they'll populate into the table. But frankly, most of these I don't really care about for this purpose, and I really don't care about the instance boot mode right now. So let's just go ahead and disable that. And now we've got a bit more of a clean interface. And we'll come back to this kind of back end here in just a second. But why don't we go ahead and get some data first? So when we start thinking about the actions, we already have a few for AWS, but we need to add more. We need more capability. So if we click on our little plus button under the data section, we have the ability to grab an action. An action is basically going to be a query. And now we can see that we have 2,270 something total actions, everything from AWS to Datadog itself, cloud providers, version control software, communication stuff. So a lot of options here, and they're adding new stuff all the time. For example, we admittedly did a dry run of this yesterday, and this wasn't here. So this is brand new. And I think Anthropic is pretty brand new as well. So Datadog is constantly adding new actions. And speaking of Datadog, since we want to grab some data about these instances, let's go ahead and see what we can do with the Datadog actions. If you're familiar with the Datadog API, you'll notice that these are pretty much named exactly like the API categories. So what we can do is we can find Datadog metrics, and these are largely in alphabetical order, which is currently escaping me. Here we go. And we'll want to make a query to get some metrics. So we can get metric metadata, we can create bulk tags configurations for metrics without limits. We can submit metrics if we choose to create a metric based off something we're doing in the app builder. But for right now, we're going to get time series points. So now we have all of the fields that we would need to fill out to access our data. So by default, it's going to access the account that you're currently in, but we could also use different Datadog account connections. So all of these are actually different accounts that we have access to where we've developed apps for customers. So it requires just an API and app key in the region, and you can create a connection based on that. So you can operate through other accounts in different regions, or we can just go ahead and say that we're going to operate on our account, even though that's the default. I figured I'd give you the value there. We do have to select the time period. So let's go ahead and say we want the past 30 minutes, which seems reasonable. And then we'll have to enter the query. So what you'll see off the bat is that as soon as I click in here, we'll have the ability to use an expression. Now, unlike some of the autofill that's present in the Datadog dashboards and everything, we do have to type the query in here manually, or in this case, admittedly, I'm going to copy and paste something from another document that you can't see, so I don't make typos. But we do have to figure out the actual raw query to put in here. Something that's handy that's a little bit underspoken in Datadog is that if we go to dashboards and hit quick graph, we can actually just within the same context without leaving here, if we click that X, we're right back here. We can just open up a graph and say, let's do CPU utilization. And now we have our basic query, and we can go ahead and open up our little kind of manual query editor, and we can just grab this, exit out of this, and we can go ahead and paste it right in here. Now, right now, if I run this query, it's just going to grab the average CPU utilization of every host. Given that we want to check each one of these hosts independently, we want to add some kind of qualifier to that. So what we can do is say, we'll use the instance ID tag, but then how do we figure out which one of these we actually want to query for? So we can actually utilize the data that is present in this table to trigger other queries. So if we have this table selected, if we scroll down to inspect data, which is present on every, whether it's a data source or a component, so here's the inspect data for this, we have the ability to actually come in here, find the data that we're looking for, and just select our expression right from there. So if I just click a row, you'll notice that selected row changed. And if I go to content, I can go ahead and find my instance ID. And if I click our context menu and click copy variable expression, and then just right in here, I can paste that in. Now, let's see if I did this correctly, and we can go ahead and click run. Sure enough, we can go ahead and inspect our data. So within this, we can see the query that we executed. We have this A8D highlighted, and we can see that it filled in through that expression. And then we can see our actual time series here. Now, we've got the data. Kevin, can I hit reboot now?
I mean, I know we have the data, but we're not really seeing anything, right? Is there a way we can kind of put this onto the app so that we can visualize what we're getting in?
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Like I said, if we hit preview or we see this app on a dashboard, we wouldn't get this debug output. So this would run, it would generate data, and nobody would be able to see it. So what's the point, right? What we can do is start to add components. So as much as we're getting data right now, we also have the ability to add other components. So we can create forms, we can create buttons, we can have the ability to upload a file, and lots of other types of things. And they're constantly adding stuff to the components as well. Like React Renderer, I just noticed this brand new yesterday. I don't even know what it does. I'll play with that later. But let's go ahead and say we want a custom chart because we have time series data and we should display it as such. So if we just drag and drop, we can resize our elements here. And just like the EC2 instance, we have some demo data in here to show you what this looks like. What we can do is we can just go ahead and say, I'm not interested, and this wipes it out. Now, what you might be saying is, hey, I've made plenty of dashboards and plenty of monitors, but this looks a lot different. What's going on? If you've played with the new wildcard widget in Datadog dashboards, this might be familiar to you. If not, this might be brand new. But this is a Vega Lite schema. Vega is very cool. It's a very flexible graphing platform that really gives you the ability to customize how your data is shown, filtered, manipulated. It gives you the ability to not just create time series charts, but histograms, bar charts, candle charts. So when we say wildcard in terms of a Datadog widget, as long as you can build it in Vega, you can use it to create data within Datadog. So admittedly, I'm not going to type out this full JSON. Instead, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste something that's a little bit pre-canned here. And if we don't fat finger things and we copy things correctly, we can paste this in here. And we can see that get CPU is not defined. Well, why is this? Because when I did this initially and planned this out, I named some of our elements, which you should do. And this is kind of a good lesson point, right? So we have list instance, start instance, stop instance, but then we also have get time series 0.0. And that's not very descriptive. For right now, it's probably fine because we know that we're only getting CPU data. But as this app grows and grows, we need to maintain it. We probably want something a bit more descriptive. So let's go ahead and just rename this to get CPU. And now if we hit run, we'll say get CPU isn't defined, which is a lie. There we go. Cool. So we run this, we should start seeing data. And for some reason we're not. And I know why that is. Now, here's the trick. We're not going to see any kind of error messages or anything from this because the query is running successfully. But if we inspect the data that's present here, it's expecting something for get CPU.outputs. And this is a little bit of an unspoken thing, but there's some data that you retrieve that does need to be manipulated in order to use it in a table or in a chart. Generally speaking, it is expecting an array of maps that then have various keys and various values to represent the data. So in order to do this, what we can do is go to the Advanced tab under our Get CPU. And now we have the ability to write JavaScript that actually manipulates the data that we're returning to then populate our various widgets. So if I just go ahead and put this snippet in here and expand this, we're just taking the series 0 from outputs, and we can safely do series 0. It's not really a great programming practice, but we're only querying for one series just by doing instance ID. And then we're grabbing the time and CPU and returning an array of objects. And if we run this again, now we've got some data. And if we select a server that's a bit more interesting in terms of what it's doing, if we run this again, just for demonstration, we can see that our data changes a little bit. And if we run it again, we'll see that there's no data because this instance is stopped. So as I continue to run the data, we can go ahead and see that our data changes. All right, Kevin, I graphed the data. Can I hit reboot yet?
We're almost there, I think. So we have the data, but it's still not much context to it. I think we've created alerts for this type of metric. Is there a way to kind of pull that in so we can see where the metric is?
Yeah, that's a good call. And second of all, speaking of naming things, this is labeled custom chart. We should probably give some context to whoever's using this. So under title, we'll just say CPU usage. Easy peasy. All right, now let's go ahead and add some monitors in here. So we'll come back to our data source. We'll do action. We know we're going to be looking for Datadog. We can scroll down to monitors, and we've got a bunch of monitors here. And now we kind of want to think how we're going to display monitors. Do we want to display the status of every monitor? Do we want to display just what's in an alert state? Or do we want to get the monitors that are specific to this instance that we're looking for? I'd say that we probably want to grab the monitors that are specific to this instance. So the best way to go ahead and do that is by using monitor groups. Monitor groups allow you to visualize the triggered monitors page where it shows you which instance or which environment, which service, however you have your monitor broken apart, we can query by that instead of just querying by monitors, because it's probably unlikely that I have a monitor that is specifically set to one server. If you do that, you get down a rabbit hole of creating way too many alerts and it's a lot to manage. So make sure you're using splits in your monitors. But let's search monitor groups as our input. So for our query, we can use the same syntax. And if you need help figuring this out, unfortunately, we don't have a quick graph type thing for monitors, but what you could do is if we were to open up our monitors page and go to triggered, we can filter down to what we want, and then we can go ahead and basically copy and paste that query into here. But what we'll want to do for now is make sure that this is templated. So if we do group instance ID, and then we'll be able to do a template expression here. And once we have typed the curly brackets and the $, we'll start to get autofill for some of this data. So we kind of already know what we're looking for, but just to show you what's in here, we'll just go ahead and hit table 0. It's dot delimited. So now if we go to hit dot, we're going to do selected row. And if we don't feel like scrolling too far, which we did enough already, we can go ahead and do that. We've got selected row, and then we want content and instance ID. And that one I'm not going to scroll for. We'll just type that in and it will autofill for you. So now we have our expression here. And if we go ahead and run this, we'll see that we do, in fact, have an alert, and we have our groups and all this information around it. So based on what I said earlier about having to manipulate some data to make sure that we're putting it into the right format, we can take a look at this and see that as much as this is an object, there is an element in the object that is an array of objects. So we're probably pretty good to go here. So what we can do is for a component, we can add another table, and then we can say, I don't want that demo data. I want to source my search monitor group 0, which we're actually just going to do. We're going to call this, well, search monitor group 0 is pretty descriptive, but it's long. So we'll say find mon. How about that? We just click off that, and now it's renamed. So we can come in here and we can type find mon, and it's going to give us a few options. So outputs.groups we know to be what we want to select, since that's what where our data is down here. And we can just click that, and away we go. Now, just like we showed with the initial table, it's basically going to autofill everything that's present within that array. If you have multiple objects in the array, that just represents different rows in this table. But most of this we probably don't want. So let's go ahead and hide some of these things that we don't really care about for now. So we'll hide this, 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 this. We'll keep the group. Group tags is going to be pretty redundant. Last no data, we're not going to care about for now. Last triggered timestamp, sure. Monitor ID, sure. Monitor name, that all sounds good. Muted, nope, 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 and nope. And now we have this nice little table, except we meant to keep group and not group tags, and that's fine. So now we can see that the instance that we queried for is in fact in an okay state, which is good. And if we run this again, well, this is telling me that something is wrong here because this server should be in an alert state. Oh, you know why? I actually rebooted this yesterday and my apps aren't running on it. So we'll keep that in mind for when we go forward with this. This should be an alert state, but let's pretend for the sake of example that this says alert, because if it says okay and I ask Kevin if I can reboot it again, he's probably going to say, no, why would you do that? It's totally in an okay state. Let's pretend. That's fine. Cool. All right. So now we've got this data here, and let's go ahead and run this again. And now we've got this group ID. Something else I kind of wanted to show you is if we have a few of these here, let's go ahead and actually just like delete some of these things, right? We'll just delete. Because why hide it if we know we're not going to need it, right? Delete. So if we go ahead and we run this query again, sometimes things don't work as expected. Basically, what I was going to show is that as we have this data selected here, oftentimes when we run another query, this is just updating nicely for us, but if we have auto update columns on, every time a request comes in, this may put those columns back in for you. So in case you run into that issue, just turn off auto update columns, and then this will be this way forever and always. And in fact, this probably would have worked just fine if I were clicking the right things in the right widget. So let's go ahead and do that. Live demos are fun. So for sake of example, let's rerun that query. We hit run. Cool. And it still didn't want to work properly. But anyway, if you run into that issue, go ahead and just turn off auto update columns, and the content that's being shown will never change again. So one thing I'm noticing about this though, Kevin, how good is your epoch time math?
You know,
what time is this?
Beats me.
All right, cool. Beats me too. So as much as we're querying raw data, we can also manipulate how it's displayed. Right now, this formatting is just currently set to string, but we can go ahead and change this to date time. And then right away, we'll see that it's July 1st, but then we also want the time. So if we detect the time format, we can also then change this. So we can see that the last time this triggered was on July 1st. And then the state changed yesterday when I actually rebooted the machine. Otherwise, this still would have been an alert state, and I'd say I'm a bad engineer because I probably should have paid attention to this. But we definitely didn't rig up any monitors for the sake of a demo. Isn't that right? All right, cool. So we have our monitor and we have our CPU usage. Kevin, do you think we're good to go to reboot?
One more thing. So
yeah.
I think we want to let people know if we're rebooting, just in case they're, keeping an eye on those instances. There's a way we can kind of send a message to some people here.
We can, but before we get there, there's one other thing that I noticed. Like, there's a bunch of buttons here, and I've already said that if we're in preview mode, we won't be able to see any of this stuff around it. And I keep having to click run to do this. There's got to be a way that we can just query this data as a user of the application and not just a developer, right? How did we get these buttons here if we can't add some ourselves? So let's go ahead and jump to this. If we scroll down to row actions over here, we'll see that we do in fact have start, stop, and reboot. If we add another one, we'll see another button populates in the table, and we can call this something like get data. Now we can also change the color. So default is going to be blue, danger is going to be red, and let's just say success. So we have a visual identifier here. And then we have reactions. So if I go click this button right now, it's not going to do anything. But if I have a reaction of trigger action, I can then select get CPU to then run the get CPU action. And you'll also get this pop-up. Sometimes API calls can take a second or several, depending on what API you're hitting. But we can also show a loading indicator when that happens. So we'll go ahead and say sure. Trigger action isn't the only thing you can do. You can also present browser notifications, open other URLs, download files. It's a bunch of other capability that we have here. But for now, for our sake, we'll trigger an action of get CPU. And then we also want to add a second action. So you can add as many actions to a button as you want. I'm not sure if there's a limit. I'm sure there's a practical limit. Whether there's an actual limit, unclear. We can also click find monitor. So now if we come back up to this, we can see that if we click this, now our data changes. So now we have a way to actually go ahead and get the data on demand before we actually do anything else. All right, you mentioned that we should probably tell somebody when we go ahead and do this. And I think that's a good idea. So since we have to make an API call to do so, let's go back to actions. And we can see that we have things like, where are we? We've got like Jira if we wanted to enter a ticket. We've got Teams that we can send a message to. Personally, I'm a Slack person. So we've got Slack, and we can make the most obvious one here, and we can click send message. So all we'd have to do is select a Slack connection that we currently have. So we'll use Nick Testing World, because that's where I do all my testing so I don't bother my coworkers. And then we'll pick an appropriately named channel, like something like Datadog Alerts. And now what we can do is we could say, attempting to reboot. Come on. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing that we've done a few times. We'll do table 0 dot selected row dot content dot capital is case sensitive instance ID. And now if we want to, we haven't actually triggered this, but we can click run and we'll see that we get an error message. Why is this? Cannot read properties of null reading content. So this is kind of where we would want to do a little inspection of the data. So we can see the data here that was input and what's actually going on. But it's likely that I probably just fat fingered this. So let's go ahead and we'll come back down to our inspect data. And oh, I don't have a row selected, so that would probably do it. Let's run this again and see if I did it correctly. Cool. So now we got a timestamp, which means there was a successful message. And if I open up Slack, I can see that I got attempting to reboot, which means that I filled in the template wrong. So and this is why we test things. So just to be safe, let's go ahead and we'll select content and we'll go to image ID and we'll see my mistake right away. The D in ID is not capitalized, but just for the sake of sanity, let's copy that, we'll paste that, we run it again, successful message, successful instance ID. Beautiful. One thing you might notice is why are there question marks now where there weren't before? This is making sure that content is there. It's just like if you're a Python person, you search a dictionary for a key and it's not there, you get a key error. But if you run .get for the name of the key, then you just get none. It's a little bit safer. It's pretty similar to this. All right, so now we have the ability to send a message, but just like we did for get data, we don't want this to run manually. So let's go ahead back to our table and we'll go to row actions and we have our reboot button and we can add another action to this. So we know that we have this action here that's already going to reboot the instance. If we add another one, we can have this do send message. And now if we click reboot, it will send that message and away we go. Kevin, can I reboot it now?
One last thing I want to clarify. So is there any way to kind of make sure that that Slack message gets sent just so that, we can confirm the whole process is working? Is there any way to do that?
Yeah, so we would, if this were to error out as much as we're in the developer section of things, there would be like an error that pops on screen that said the message has failed. But I think what you might be asking is how do we make sure that the reboot worked specifically? So what we can do is if we go to the reboot instance and we go to advanced, we have a few other things that we can select here. So we have events here. And this is a reaction that runs after the query finishes if we hover over for the tooltip. So what we can do is we can see that when this event finishes, it's automatically going to relist the instances. But just like the buttons on the table, we can go ahead and add another one. And we can change this to trigger the action of send message. Now, if we do that, it's still going to send the message of attempting to reboot. So what I would recommend doing is to create a few of these, one that says attempt message, one that says success message, and one that says error message. So we're running a little bit short on time to be able to go ahead and plug that in, but we would then have the ability on execution finished to say action completed. We could also do execution success and say successfully rebooted the machine, or error and say we couldn't reboot the machine for whatever reason. But just for now, let's go ahead and get rid of that just so we don't break anything. So we have the ability to tell people in a few different ways that we're doing what we're doing. So let's go ahead and move this out of the way. We'll get our data and we'll pretend that this says alert and we'll pretend that this is 97%. Kevin, can I reboot this now?
I'm done annoying you. I think we can reboot now.
Well, I'm done annoying you because if I have to ask you to reboot this one more time, I think you might reach to the screen. All right, let's go ahead and click reboot. Now, the nice thing about this is that Datadog makes the fair assumption that as much as we wrote an app, that we're human and we still make mistakes. It's going to ask us for confirmation. It's not just going to do things for you. You do have to make sure that you are actually wanting to do this. And if we go down to inputs, what we'll see is that we have the expression. So this is exactly what we expect it to be based on what we've done already. But we can see that this evaluated expression is going to be the actual instance we want to start, and then the region that we're doing it in. So we've got A8D, just to be sure. This is the row that we had highlighted. So we can go ahead and click reboot. We hit confirm. And then we look back in our Slack channel and we see that we got our Slack message that it attempted to reboot. And away we go. We can also see that we did hit the reboot instance and it was successful. So if we had it rigged up where we were actually sending a Slack message for a successful action, we would get that. And then there we go. So we just built a simple application that allows us to visualize our EC2 instances, show some data about the CPU utilization, check if there's any monitors, and then reboot and send a Slack message. So that's a pretty basic execution of the app builder. Kevin, is there anything else that you wanted to explore here?
Yeah, I got another quick question to keep annoying you. So I know we kind of made a lot of different connections throughout this demo. Is there any place we can go to kind of keep track of these connections, see, how the entire application is working from a bird's eye view?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we go to our little cogwheel up top and we hit admin console, we actually have the ability to see how all of these are intertwined. And of course, now that we look at this, we can really reinforce the exact reason that we actually want to name all of our components, because we've got table 0. What if we had 10 tables? We want to know which is which, so we want to be a little bit more descriptive. So we can see exactly how these things flow into one another and what the relationships are. But then we can also see the relationships of the individual properties. And as we look through, we can see that table 0 has these various rows. And this can get pretty complicated, just like any flowchart can, but we have the ability to understand exactly what pieces of data are connected to what and how. And then if you really want to see all the data for the entire app, we now have the ability to do that. And from here, we can explore everything that is present. So we really have a bird's eye view of everything that we may want to see. Cool. So now the only real last steps here. First of all, we talked about naming a little bit. As we look in the top left corner here, you'll see that it's just like a Datadog default dashboard, and that it's got your name and the date and the name of the blueprint if you used one. Let's be a little bit more descriptive, and we'll say demo from webinar. And then we can go ahead and just click off that. We've renamed it. And then if we hit save as new app, there we go. So now this is actually saved. Originally, this is just a draft. It's not actually published yet. The only person that can still currently access this is me. But if I want to enable my team to be able to use this, I would just hit publish. And now we actually get some of the role-based access control that Kevin was talking about earlier. So I can keep it to only me. My organization can view it, but they can't do anything with it. If I was part of a team, which I'm not, because this is just a Datadog sandbox account, we would be able to say just my team, just the SRE team, just whoever. We can say everybody in my org, which since we have the ability to start, stop, and reboot instances, we probably don't want to do that. Or we can click custom, and then we have the ability to select particular roles, particular teams, particular individuals, and then determine who can view, who can edit, and then kind of move on that way. So we do have some role-based access control. Now we hit publish, and then if we wanted to view our application, this is what it actually looks like in practice. So this is what it would look like on a dashboard. This is what it would look like as an application. And yeah, now we've got role-based access control. We've got a functional little app that works. And hopefully this is a good demonstration for you on how to utilize the app builder.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. That was fantastic. Thank you, Kevin and Nick. We're now going to roll into some live Q&A. Everybody, thanks so much for submitting all your questions throughout the demo and the upfront portion. If you have any last minute thoughts or questions you want us to address, feel free to throw those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, let's get right to it. Okay, Nick, does
Yes.
AWS Sandbox appear in the connections dropdown because it was already figured in the AWS integration?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So there's a few different things that we can do here. We can create a new connection where we would add our account ID and the role name, and this is very, very much related to the same way that we have the Datadog integration hooked up for pulling down your metrics and everything like that. Conveniently enough, this is actually the same role that we use. So you do still have to create a new connection. It's not populated by default. So I did just create a new connection with the same role and everything. Now the trick is that, of course, when you create the Datadog integration role, it is read only. It has no access to actually start, stop, or reboot. So as much as this is in bad practice, for the sake of the demo, I went ahead and gave my Datadog integration role the access to do that for EC2s. I would highly, highly recommend that you create a new role to the most minimally scoped permissions that the app builder needs. But you would have to create a new connection. You'd have to have your AWS account ID, the role name, and then after you put that all in, it is going to ask for like an external ID and everything, just like you would have to do for the AWS integration. So it's not automatically populated. If we were to go into actions and then look at connections, we have the ability to manage all of our connections here. And we can connect to many, many different things, and then just have those ready to go. And those will populate in the particular dropdowns. So you do have to do a little bit of legwork, but the fact that it makes you do a little legwork is good because you shouldn't have given a role that gives pure admin access into a platform that you could accidentally give your entire org access to, and that sort of thing. So no, it does not automatically populate, but the setup, if you're familiar with the AWS integration, is very, very much the same. I think that answers, I can see the rest of the QA question. Are there any minimum permissions required for connections to become selectable in App Builder? There are some role-based access controls, just like everything else in Datadog. There are specifically role parameters for the App Builder. So if we come in here, we can see that we can do view, we could do write. We have the ability to like create data stores and connections and action interface run. So there are options to restrict access to the App Builder. If we look back to the standard, Datadog role, and we take a look in the App Builder side of things, we can see that by default, it does actually have all of these present. So if you're a standard user in an account, you can do everything that I just did, except for create a new private action runner. And then the last part of that question was, if a connection is not configured with enough permissions to perform the requested action, you'll get an error. It will tell you that you do not have the ability to do so. So if I did something like, I don't know if I would have a good example right now, but if I didn't have the permissions to actually do this, you would get an error message populated in this section down here that says, like, you know, role does not have access to perform action XYZ. And you would get a pretty clear error about that, and then you could go adjust that. Cool.
I can go ahead. I'll take the next question, I believe, from looks like Ed, asking if I'm stuck trying to get any part of this working, is there a slice of Datadog support engineers that are versed in this so that we can get some troubleshooting? So my answer, having experience, 2 years of experience being a Datadog support engineer, the answer to this question is 100% yes. So if you are stuck, feel free to reach out to the support. They're going to be very good at helping you out. A few things I'll say from my experience is the more context you can bring them, the easier and better help you're going to get. So if you come to them with, a question on, hey, I haven't started building my app, but this is what I want to do. Can you help me build it? That's going to be a little bit harder than, hey, I've built out 90% of my app. I can't get this one step to work. Can you help me troubleshoot that? That's going to be a little bit better method to get the actual help you need. But overall, feel free to reach out to support. They're always going to be there to support you and help you figure out your issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. There's another good question in here, and something that I was hoping someone asked that that I could cover. Can we connect to custom internal APIs? Datadog is a SaaS provider. How does this work? That's a fantastic question. So something that's been present in Datadog for a few years now is the Datadog Synthetics private runners. So if you have an internal API, you can still run synthetic browser API tests. They do also have a private runner for workflow actions. And if we were to go and create an action for data, there's a button up here that says support private. So this is what we can actually run on private networks. So there's things like Kubernetes, there's PostgreSQL. So it's kind of limited in terms of what it can do in some cases. But for an internal API, we have the ability to make a request where you would provide the URL, the request body, any headers, authentication. And then you definitely would have the ability. So what this is basically going to do, just like a synthetic test, when you hit run, it's going to queue up that request. The internal workflow runner or app builder runner will grab this down, execute the action, and then pass it back up to Datadog. So yes, it is a SaaS platform. There are internal runners that run in your network, and Datadog as a SaaS product doesn't actually push anything to that. It is instead pulled by those runners. They execute it, they report the data back. So there's like a little bit of latency in there, but it does give you the ability to query internal APIs for data from a SaaS provider.
Nick, I'll pose this question to you.
Sure.
We can use the app we just built in a little bit of context, but say we reboot, our instance, it fails silently in the background. Is there any way we can kind of detect that and retry if we do detect a silent fail or something similar?
Yep. So that's a great question. So just like we had here where we went to execution finished, what we would want to do, so as much as there is the ability to change this from execution error, this is a little bit misleading because it's not going to wait for this to finish. It would just give you an error if you didn't have the correct role permissions or something like that. It's not going to actually wait for it to reboot because depending on the size of the server, if you're running like a Windows server on a T2 micro, yeah, it's probably going to take a few minutes to reboot. So we're not going to wait for that to actually execute. But what we could do is we could have this kind of set to, so this will automatically refresh on that action, but we could also just hit refresh a few times. And we don't have anything that's running, and these are pretty fast machines that reboot quickly. But it would show in a like stopped or starting state. So there are multiple states that would show here. So you may want to just kind of have this, basically check back in on things. The other thing to consider is that if we actually did have this as a real application for usage, we would either have data not reporting, and we used an AWS metric just out of convenience. But if this was an agent metric that was reporting, we would have the data coming in at a much faster rate than the AWS integration. And then we would see our alert state change from no data or alert to okay or a few other things, but then we would also see the status of the machine here. That said, if something fails, we really only have the ability to start, stop, and reboot in this section. If there's an issue with the instance itself that's starting up but it's causing it to crash or something like that, just like you'd have to troubleshoot anything else from any other automated script, you may have to jump into the account and onto the machine to really see what's going on. So there are a few ways to indicate that. It's just a matter of how you write your application to be able to query for that data regularly and then handle any failures. Let's see. Here's a quick one. Can we get a recording of the session? Yes. Anyone who has registered for it after the recording is ready will receive a copy along with the slideware. So that's a pretty simple answer.
Is there a way to set the time zone? So assuming this probably means getting the information back from either the time series query, is there any way to kind of adjust that?
Yep. So let's see. In our time format, we have the ability to change it to GMT time so we can actually see the time zone. But just like everything else in Datadog, whether you actively notice it or not, it is related to the time zone of your browser. So, right now, This says 11:31 for me because it's GMT time. Oh wait, this is the last trigger time. Just like anything else in Datadog, whether you're looking at a time series chart or a log entry, it will adjust the time zone of your locale. So there's not really a need to compensate for that time zone, but we could also select a type of visualization of this timestamp where we include the time zone as well. So, 11:31 GMT -4. So we could kind of identify that way. There's also the relative time button where it could say about 1 month ago, but that's not really the question. So time zone handling isn't super necessary. All these queries do wind up being relative to your time zone. If we're talking about when we get the data, we can also use, so past 30 minutes is relative. Absolute time range is also, we have the ability to set a time zone here. So, any time zone that you could think of is here. So if we wanted to run a specific time period query, we do also have the ability to select the time zone in that case. All right. Let's see, we still have a few minutes here. If we don't get to any of these questions today, what we will do is we'll answer everything in a blog post that we'll send out along with the recording of all of this.
I see a question. I think it's kind of asking what the difference is between App Builder and workflow automations, which is a very good question. So the way I like to think about it is workflows are fully automated and more on a reactive scale, whereas App Builder is kind of the human in the loop and takes a proactive approach. So workflows, kick off based on a trigger, whereas the App Builder, like we saw here, is the human comes in and actually reboots the instance. So that's kind of the way I like to think about it, but it is a good question because they do have their similarities there.
I think Kevin, can we call workflows from the App Builder?
Yes.
Cool. So I think one differentiation that I like to think about as well is, so if we scroll down to workflow automation, we can trigger a workflow here, pass in the inputs, and wait on it as well. And I think one primary difference between workflows and app builders is that App Builder, as much as we have the ability to add transformers and function calls and variables for state management, generally, this isn't completely true, but if we're kind of to summarize things, I would say that the App Builder is a bit more stateful and kind of meant for not one-time operations to use an app and then throw it out, but we come here, we grab the data, we reboot the machine, and that's kind of it, and we're done and over with. We do have the ability for some simple logic in here, but workflows are much more robust in terms of their if else or on error or running a for loop. So something that comes up pretty frequently when we talk about the App Builder is, some of these APIs are paginated. Like if we're searching for logs or we're searching for users, there's pagination here. And as of right now, the App Builder itself won't handle that, but the workflows will. So we have the ability to trigger a Datadog workflow from the App Builder, just like we would trigger any other action. And that workflow can harness a lot of the rest of the looping logic or if else handling, do a bit more conditional work in that case. And I think the nice thing is, if I remember correctly, you do get a certain number of workflow invocations for every application that you build. So there is I think there's another question in the Q&A that's asking about the cost of this. And I don't know the dollar amount off the top of my head, but each published application has a fee associated with it, but it does, to the best of my knowledge, also come with a certain number of workflow executions on top of it. So you have the ability to create your app and then also run some workflows that are related to it. So you have some additional functionality there. Let's see, what else do we have? And Kevin, you see any other QA questions in here? See an interesting one. Kevin, can multiple engineers develop on this synchronously?
I believe, keep me honest here, I think only one engineer can work on a single app before it's published, but if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me.
Yeah, so you can save it as a draft, but no one else will really have access to this until it's published. But what you could do is publish this and then change the change the permissions to only allow certain people to edit it. And we would just have to know that it's not like a Slack canvas or something where multiple people can be typing at the same time. It really is one person working on it at a time. But in terms of collaborative efforts, just kind of like for the future, if we wanted to share this to another account or store this in a Git repository, if you look at the JSON, really all you would have to do is copy and paste this out and then copy and paste it back into a new account. And then if you do that, the only thing that you really have to do is come in and make sure that you have the proper connections configured. So if you don't have the NoBS DD connection in your account, which you probably don't, you would need to add your own connection in here to get this working. But there is also a Datadog API endpoint to manage applications where you could take that same JSON payload and post that back out. Or the Terraform provider also supports managing App Builder. So if you take the JSON from this application, store it in a repository, want to manage it with Terraform or other configuration management, you certainly have the option to do so. Let's see.
See a question, why would people ever use dashboards if you can embed graphs alongside functionality with App Builder? But I think is a really good question. So dashboards are still going to be extremely useful in the fact that not every single metric you use or see inside Datadog is going to be actionable, meaning, leading to a reboot, right? So you have executive KPIs of X amount of dollars, per week, whatever it is, you can display that in a dashboard, and that's going to be something where you don't necessarily need functionality alongside. Nick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the other thing is that one, I pulled this up because as much as this is a simple example, would you rather create widgets where you click and search for the name of a metric, add your filters, and then add your splits and maybe a few functions? Or do you really want to write a Vega schema every time? You're also going to lose some of the functionality like a shared crosshair and everything. Like with Vega, if you don't put a crosshair into your widget here, like as you can see, as much as I scroll over this, it's not going to show me any of these data points. So you have to write that in. So if you use the app builder to create dashboards, you don't have nearly as much functionality. As much as we show that there is some templating capability, it's not as functional or simple to get people off the ground and running. And like we often say that's one of the easiest ways or one of the biggest reasons that people use Datadog is its ease of onboarding and functionality with dashboarding and monitors. It really enables people to get in there. But then I think the other kind of like big elephant in the room is, somebody asked about the cost of App Builder, and App Builder apps do have a cost, whereas dashboards don't. So I would say reserve App Builder apps for things that require taking action or additional things that a dashboard is just not capable of, and really just build dashboards as dashboards. And then if you really need a certain app in a dashboard, you can also you can export this to a dashboard. So if we just take this and we add it to a new dashboard, suddenly we are in a regular dashboard where we can add any other information, but we still also have access to the app. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? You don't need to build a dashboard in the app. You put the app in a dashboard. And I think that brings us up to time.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Kevin. Everybody, awesome Q&A. And as Nick mentioned, we're going to be following up with the blog post, and we'll answer all the questions that came in, especially the ones that we couldn't get to today because we ran out of time. If you guys have any questions about App Builder or Datadog in general, the NoBS team, we're here to help. There's a QR code on our slide. And you can always go to our website, nobs.tech, anytime and book time directly with the team. Thanks, everybody, for spending your time with us this afternoon. We hope it was helpful, and take care and enjoy the rest of the day. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.